I thought from a business standpoint, I think that scalability is quite interesting. It sort of overlays with one of my own companies, Statseed, so I won't be able to investigate, but that's the one which sort of captured my attention. The robot was really good, but we don't do robots, so.
Okay.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Not only was that interesting from a business perspective, but they have so much traction already. I think they said 1.8 million appointments booked in the last 18 months. And so they're past the point of determining product market fit. And it's already clear that there's a need for their service. So they were the ones that seemed most impressive to me.
Great. Aileen?
I think I would have to agree as well. I think it's probably a little bit unfair to the companies who are just launching today because they haven't yet gotten the traction that Schedulicity has had. But I think it's one thing that I've appreciated across almost all of the presentations that I think they really clearly addressed a pain point up front. There are a lot of clear market needs out there, but I think unfortunately with the consumer businesses, a lot of it is about how you really go after the market adoption challenges, and there's just a lot of execution in building your brand and creating that right marketplace dynamic oftentimes when you have to get both suppliers and buyers on board at the same time.
Got it.
Yeah, I think it's unanimous in it. It's definitely Schedulicity for me. I would actually like to meet them, have a long meeting and get into it if they're raising money. But also, I think the world of the team at Statseed as well. They're killing it. So there's a trend that we're noticing, which is there's a number of businesses growing really fast, and this theme of streamlining the ability to kind of schedule time at doctor's offices, dentist offices, salons, and so on, and they're growing quite fast. So it's a very interesting space. But kudos to that last one. They definitely got our attention in terms of true RSVP. I shudder to think what my percentage show up at RSVP.
You should have played.
Yeah, exactly. It's bad. I get partial points.
Of these that you saw today, do any of them strike you to have the potential of some of the great successes we've seen in the consumer space? The Zyngas, Groupons, that sort of thing.
That's a high bar.
Yeah, I think that Aileen sort of mentioned that the issue is sort of adoption, and what's interesting with Schedulicity is both because they've already reached some level of what we call the escape velocity, so they have set numbers that mean that it's actually working at some scale. A lot of the other companies are just too early, so it's kind of difficult for us to figure out, hey, is there here what we think can actually take off and become successful? So we'd have to spend more time.
Right.
I think what I'd add to that is what I liked about Schedulicity is that it didn't require a lot of change in consumer behavior, but the change that it's looking for is actually on the side of the person or the business that has an incentive to change their behavior. And I think that's one of the things you want to really think about. There's a saying that it takes 21 days to make a habit on the consumer side. And so, when you're trying to get someone to do something completely new, is the business that you're trying to build going to require someone to have to do something completely different, or is there enough frequency or enough of a real pain point that's measurable that you're going to be able to get them to create a whole new habit?
I will say I wouldn't be surprised if Schedulicity could actually become if they execute perfectly, they could be a 100 million type revenue company. If they continue to execute and they have flawless team building and surround themselves with the right people. So
there were a lot of really interesting ideas. Probably one of the reasons that we're responding so well to Schedulicity, beyond the fact that it was a clearly articulated value proposition up front, is the fact that they have traction. And it brings us to what I think is probably the biggest challenge for consumer internet companies today. And that is there are lots of great ideas out there, but managing to bring together consumers on a repeated basis to your service in a space where there are literally thousands of distractions for consumers, that seems to be the hard thing. I mean, I think I'm probably, at least currently, the only operator up here on the stage, and I can tell you from running my own companies that the idea is really important, but what's super important these days is the distribution strategy. And in the 5 minutes or 6 minutes that we had to listen to most of these guys, it was difficult for us to understand so quickly how are you going to get people to use this great service that you're talking about. In Schedulicity's case, they already have people using the thing, so it's easier for us to conceptualize of them as a success.
I will say, even if they didn't have traction, I would have still picked them. I mean, there were a number of things about the team and the way they were able to articulate their vision that it's just signal noise for the kind of quality that you're looking for.
I think let's stop talking about Schedulocity. I think Gime, I was trying to
Yes, sir.
name. Gime was the second one that got my attention. We were looking into the whole sort of loyalty space, which is how do you create sort of an organic retention with customers, and how do you get them to come to your restaurant or shop or whatever, and then come back. And I thought that the solution was pretty well articulated. The fact that you didn't need to have a smartphone, which is the case with most solutions, was interesting. The question is, what are the proof points? What have they done so far that proves that people are actually using it, both merchants and users?
Moving on to another one that I thought was really interesting, Job On. Looked like it was extremely promising. I can tell you from looking at dozens and hundreds of resumes over the years that it's very difficult to get a sense of a candidate just looking at a resume. When you can quickly look at a 30-second or couple of minute video interview from someone or video promotional reel, it makes a big difference. And so I saw that immediately as a practical thing that many people could use.
Nirav, I was thinking about you during Get.com because I figured from your Evite days you probably had some lessons on, it's such a big pain problem in terms of making purchase decisions, and so how do you basically leverage community to be able to give feedback? Do you have thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I really liked Get.com, and I was one of the founders and CEO of a company called Opinions, which launched back in 1999, trying to help people figure out what to buy. And the Get idea is really nice. I mean, using people's advice and expertise to help you guide your own purchase decisions. The challenge for them, again, is going to be just getting traffic. Because these days there are hundreds of price comparison sites, there are hundreds of consumer review sites, and there are hundreds of sites that do neither but still have product advice on them. And so we found that generally people just go to Google to find this kind of information. And if you're trying to simply play the search engine optimization game, that's a very difficult game to play. So I would encourage Get to think about creative distribution techniques to grow virally and to create some kind of lock-in so people come directly to their own site.
Great suggestions. Good. There was a lot of talk today about pain points and various businesses, how solving those pain points is what one can find as a guarantee to success in many cases. And what I find myself thinking that there are sort of two life pain points I see addressed today. One is, it's been said that fiction is reality with the dull parts removed. And in a sense, what one does when one creates one's own memorial to oneself is, in some cases, fictionalizing their lives. Certainly in games, there's a lot of fictional behavior. And the other is sort of a hyper-reality, where this kind of uber efficiency with regard to scheduling oneself and having everything sort of working like clockwork seems to be the two trends. One sort of moving to fantasy, one more moving to this like sort of augmented reality almost. That's not the right term, but that's sort of what I'm thinking. I wonder if you have any thoughts on that in terms of pain points.
I think in this economy, one of the pain points is the money you have in the bank account, and so savings and figuring out ways to actually spend less on buying something, hopefully a good that you actually need or a service you actually need, is really sort of solving a pain point. And so that's why you've seen essentially the success of all those Groupon leading social sort of knockoffs, which aren't really sort of inventing anything per se, but creating an inventory of things you can buy on the cheap that people sort of flock to.
Yeah, I think the CEO of NeighborPoint said, saving money never gets old, or something like that. And I think that's definitely true. We've seen in the last couple of years that as a huge trend, people never get tired of saving money. And it's especially true in recessionary times. It's even true during boom times. It's never uncool to save money. And so any company that capitalizes on that, again, it's an immediate value proposition for a consumer. It's an immediate pain point solved. It's an immediate value proposition that's articulated.
I'm just on the contrarian side of that. I'm interested in the trend of people actually willing to pay more for really special, unique experiences. Is kind of what I'm calling, instead of the freemium model, the dreamium model, is that people are seeking unique experiences and they're willing to pay more for them. And so, I've been seeing things bubble up as a trend where people could want to pay to have very unique experiences. So I think that dreamium model is really interesting, and people aren't as focused on optimizing for saving as they are for optimizing for collecting incredible experiences.
targeting another sort of bracket in the income sort of curve.
Well, I think that another important point around Dreamium, though, is that that's where I think design and brand is a big differentiator. And I know a lot of the companies, almost all the companies we saw today are very early stage, but I would emphasize that I think design is a huge critical advantage and a differentiator in today's market, because technology is fairly commoditized. It's really, you're not going to win on your technology platform. You're probably going to win largely on when someone comes to the site for the first time, what's the impression they get? Is it super clean? Is it slick? I mean, if you think about how many people now are used to the Flipboard interface, you know, some of the interfaces that we saw, I know a lot of these are kind of first, the 1.0 versions, but I think consumers expect the 2.0 and the 3.0 version pretty quickly out of the gate. And as someone mentioned, there's just so many points of competition for users' attention. The first time they get to your site, if they don't see something beautiful and clean and very modern and progressive feeling, they may not come back.
That's a great point by Eileen. I think design and kind of wanting, it's all aspirational, is that when you look at what Apple has done and Steve Jobs has done, is that it's almost democratized beautiful design and experience for the masses. And that's a huge contribution. I think, you know, Flipboard is a great example of that, and it's affecting the standards that a lot of entrepreneurs have, and that's a good thing overall for everyone.
So in terms of the companies you saw today, did you see any really original or creative leveraging of social or mobile or the cloud that spoke to you?
I thought that the neighbor oil one was sort of, I tried to figure out during the first 3 minutes what it meant, but then I sort of got the way to get the points. And I think it's for a certain sort of type of demographic and profile of users, it's actually pretty interesting. What I don't know is where they are in terms of proving that, but I thought it was an interesting concept.
Yeah, I'm sort of biased in this way because I'm running a company now called Nextdoor that is about real-world social networks between you and your neighbors. But I think one of the next incarnations now of social media is going to be with people that live in your locality. So insofar as you can bring those people together, it's a really useful thing. Technology has been very successful at bringing you closer to the people that you live far from, but it hasn't done as much to the people right in your vicinity. So I think that is a pretty promising area.
I thought that the TradePal sort of UI seemed to be, once you got it working, seemed to be pretty well done.
Yeah.
I mean, a number of the companies are trying to leverage social, and I think the beautiful thing is, without a lot of money and a lot of people, you can try things very quickly, and you just need to iterate very rapidly. Because I think in the TradePal example, the peer-to-peer marketplace, there is a marketplace right now that really leverages social pretty well, I think, called Yard Seller. And so, you know, there are existing benchmarks out there in some of the ventures that we saw, so you have to make sure you're a lot better and that you've learned the lessons against the people who are already in the marketplace. What are you going to do differently? What are you going to do better based on what they've already done?
Good. We did see some interesting, as I mentioned earlier, leveraging of demographics today in terms of, you know, the vast numbers of boomers that are going to be moving into, whether they like it or not, old age and likely not immortality, much as they might try to retain that flame with iTunes. Do you have any thoughts on that demographic and the opportunities it represents?
Well, there's, Eileen and I were just saying that getting old sucks, but there's definitely, as that generation becomes much more sort of computer savvy, and I've seen that with my own parents, it opens up a brand new set of opportunities where you could actually provide a lot of life support, medication kind of devices and services that will be sort of life-saving. And I think that it just opens up right now because of the tablets, because of a lot of devices which are sort of easy to use for them. So it's a definitely interesting area.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I've seen my parents get iPhones simply so they can follow their kids and friends around on Facebook. And even though my parents never learned how to type, they can easily manipulate a tablet, whether it's an iPad or an iPhone or any Android device. And so I think being able to target that demographic that may not have thought of themselves as computer savvy, but is now using computers just in a different form factor, a tablet form factor or a phone form factor, that's undoubtedly a pretty big demographic that can be very valuable. I mean, they're also used to paying for things. You know, our generation is used to getting everything for free. I think our parents are used to paying for things.
I had immigrant parents, and so they saved up money to buy me my first computer. It was an Apple IIc, and it changed my life. So full circle, I bought my mom an Apple, a Macintosh, a Mac laptop, and it was a white one, and she was so happy. And I spent a day like training her. And it was the worst mistake I've ever made. My Facebook page is like full. I'm kidding. It's a great thing. But my mom is like now constantly on Facebook, like putting like 15 things on my hearts and roses and everything. And it's amazing and hilarious. But I think that's also a signal noise that they're hungry to connect with the world. And in a way, think about Social Security is there to take care of people over time. I think we're going to realize that social software is really social security, that connecting people, regardless of distance, is going to be really incredible. And I think that's going to be a saving grace for our society to be able to retain that humanness and keep people from being completely alone.
I actually think that's profound, and it also speaks to some of the folks we saw today in terms of the neighbor and the oil, and we may see more of that. There's no question. I think as people distrust what happens in Washington more and rely more on their own networks, it'll be fascinating to watch. So in closing, do any of you folks have any advice for those companies who admittedly are not along as far in terms of the Schedule CD and some of the others, for them to get to that point, which will be an inflection?
So the two things I think would be, one, figure out what's unique, what's different, what's a must-have, what's your hook. We call that a hook. So what gets those users to sort of come and to stay, and then what's your unique, or maybe not so unique, sort of customer acquisition strategy. How do you get these people? Where do you find them? Do you find them on search, Facebook? So try everything, figure out what's the best way to get to the first level of footprint that will be meaningful to the potential investors that might look at what you're doing and say, this is interesting, let's put some money in and figure this out.
Yeah, just to sort of summarize what people have said up here, I mean, the first is you want to have a clearly articulated value proposition, right? I mean, you want to understand what pain point you're solving, and you follow that with why are you different, or why are you better, or why is this something unique? And then the third thing is, and this is what Aileen said, I mean, you need to have great design. You need to be able to iterate quickly on product, and you need to have proof points, even in a small audience, that whatever you've built is delighting your consumers, right? And if you focus on those three things, you'll start to build a little bit of momentum, and I think these investors up here will start to pay attention.